Resort Studios. We go right now to the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Kendall Rogers, D1 Baseball. Check out the website, d1baseball.com. If you are a college baseball fan, you already know about D1 Baseball. If you are a college baseball fan and you don't, welcome from the cave that you've been living in. Immediately go and subscribe. All the information you need, all the information you want at d1baseball.com. Good afternoon, Kendall.
How's it going?
Good, man. What a slate of games we have on just a random April Tuesday. We got Florida State tonight. We got Georgia Tech, Auburn tonight. We've got Georgia, Clemson tonight, Ole Miss and Memphis, Mississippi State and UAB, Alabama, Southern Miss. This is a good Tuesday night.
It is, and then we have randomly Texas Tech and Stanford playing like right now out on the West Coast. I'm not sure why Texas Tech went out to Northern California on a Sunday afternoon after they just played, but it is what it is. So, yeah, it is a star-studded day, and then you have UConn and BC playing right now as well. You have two top 20 clubs.
That's interesting with Texas Tech and Stanford. Texas Tech's done some of that. You remember a couple of years ago they played two. I guess it was the COVID season, 2020. They played two midweek games against Mississippi State in Biloxi on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. Now I know Biloxi is a little closer than Palo Alto, but not by a lot. I mean, it's a long way to Lubbock from anywhere.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech subscribes to the idea of, like, anywhere, anytime, kind of like the old Pat Hill and Fresno State. I think they realize they're not going to get a lot of teams going to Lubbock in midweek. So, you know what? They know they got to get on the road and play people, and they got to play people when the other teams are willing to play them. So I think that's what it kind of boils down to.
All right, so this weekend is weekend number 5 in SEC play. After the games finish on Sunday, we will be halfway through. Give me your biggest surprise through 4 weeks in the SEC, and maybe the thing that has disappointed you the most.
I would say my biggest surprise would be probably just how good South Carolina is. I mean, I think Kentucky. I think for me, even though UK is 27-5, I think the jury is still out of them a little bit. They lost a series to Georgia over the weekend. So I think for me, when I look at South Carolina, just how good they've been has been really impressive. I thought they were a top 20 to 25 type of club. But, I mean, you look at the way they hit LSU over the weekend, Ethan Petrie, the talented freshman. I mean, he looked like a seasoned veteran against Paul Skeens. That was probably the best at bat I've seen against Paul Skeens this year. They were solid top to bottom in that lineup. I thought on the mound, obviously they kind of imploded there at the end, and give LSU credit for coming back. But, on the mound, they had several guys with really good stuff. So I think South Carolina is the biggest surprise, and I think in terms of my biggest disappointment, I would go with Mississippi State. I mean, I think a lot of people will just naturally look at Ole Miss and go, well, they're the defending national champions. They're the biggest disappointment with their record. But, I mean, I think when you look at Ole Miss, I think you can legitimately go, you know what? They're okay offensively, and this was a year where they really could not afford to get Hunter Elliott out for an extended period of time because of some of the newcomers like Saunier, Rivas, and et cetera. And, I think I actually think Ole Miss will be fine the second half of the season. I think Mississippi State and just how bad they've been at times this year has been the biggest surprise to me. I thought this would be a rebound year for them. We didn't have them ranked in the preseason, but I thought this was a definite regional team, and right now it's a definite not regional team. And so we'll see if the weekend in Alabama kind of gets this team going a little bit. They got some big hits over the weekend. They were able to generate some offense. Nate dumped it really well to the bullpen for them in one of those decisive games. So maybe that was the spark they needed. And what's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, what's really interesting is you have two teams that I feel like are going into one of the biggest weekends of the year, and kind of a must-win situation. So I think it just sets the stage for what should be an awesome weekend in Starkville.
That's exactly where I was headed next. For both of these teams, I mean, Mississippi State maybe the slightest bit more momentum after winning 2 out of 3 and finally getting a series win. Ole Miss having another disappointing weekend where they had a chance to win more than one game and they only came away with one game when it was all said and done. And so when you point to this weekend, I mean, I know when you start the halfway point of the season, you're starting week 5, calling a series must win feels a little, I don't know, maybe a little hyperbolic, but I don't know that either of these teams have got room left to lose this series and still have a chance to make the postseason.
Well, the biggest reason why I feel like, I think more than Ole Miss, I think Mississippi State this weekend is bigger because, number one, you have to protect your home field, right, in this league. If you don't protect your home field, you're in big trouble. And I think the other thing I look at, too, is, Ole Miss still has LSU left, but the rest of that schedule is pretty navigable. And I think when you look at Mississippi State, you have, Ole Miss this weekend, you're at Tennessee, Arkansas, at LSU, and then A&M. That's a really, really difficult finish. So I think this is a bigger weekend for Mississippi State. I think you got to protect your home, and you look at that remaining schedule. And when you lose this weekend, you're looking at that remaining schedule going, like, where in the world am I getting 13 conference wins from out of that schedule?
Kendall, we were playing around with the kind of the standings in the SEC right now, and I think there's 7 teams that you can highlight, underline, circle, and you go, okay, those teams are going to be at Hoover. And by the way, it was not lost on us that we were having a conversation about getting to the SEC tournament in a state where you've got the last 2 national champions. So the conversation has changed a little bit. We recognize that. But then after that, it's like, okay, you got 7 teams that are playing for the other 5 spots. And it's like, okay, out of that group, I feel like Texas A&M is in the process of turning a corner. But aside from that, I got no idea how this plays out over the final 6 weeks of the regular season.
No, I'm with you, man. Look, I feel like Auburn and Ole Miss are very similar. I think both those teams can really hit. I think both those teams really scuffle in the mound at times. And so I think they're very similar. I think Mississippi State right now, I don't think there's a lot going great for them. They're starting to get a little healthy on their mound. We'll see how they look moving forward. But, I would agree that A&M is kind of the team out of that group that I feel the best about. I think the last couple of weekends they're starting to play a lot better. They're starting to kind of figure out their pitching rules. Honestly, they should have swept Auburn. There's like a blown call in the 9th inning that kept them from not sweeping Auburn. So I do feel like they are playing better. I think Missouri's still a solid club. You look at Missouri's league record, you're going, oh, man, 4-8, they must stink. But, for a team that lost like 3 arms to injuries, they've actually done a pretty nice job. Like, they were in every single game against Vandy over the weekend in Columbia. And so, I think for me right now, if I was a betting man, I think I would have Georgia and either Auburn or State being the 2 teams at home.
Wow. That's you do realize that you have set yourself up for a flurry of text messages of why do you hate Mississippi State?
Hey, here's the thing. I'll go ahead and say it. I don't care how many people tweet it out. But, college baseball is better when Ole Miss and Mississippi State are better in baseball. And I would love nothing more than to be wrong on that. But, even with that weekend against Alabama, I think, Alabama for me, I didn't even mention them. They're a club that I could see falling out because, Alabama, we talked about this in the preseason. We thought that they would be a lot better. We thought they'd be kind of South Carolina-esque. But what kind of happened there is for a program like Alabama that has not experienced a lot of success in recent years, you just kind of wonder a little bit when they're finding ways to lose series. And once you do that, and once that's kind of ingrained in your culture, man, it's hard to get rid of that. So Alabama is the other team, I think, even more so than probably State and Ole Miss that I'm really worried about because I think they're really, really treading on the edge right now. They need a series win in the worst way.
Kendall, I watched Arkansas up close this weekend for the first time, and I think that's a fine baseball team, but I didn't see anything that I thought was super special about that team, and yet there they are, 8-4 in the league. If you look at their, statistically, they don't blow you away with anything they do. Is this a Dave Van Horn club that just keeps on winning and we look up and they're hosting and maybe they're even a top 8 seed?
Yeah, I think this is a classic Dave Van Horn coaching job. We've talked so much over the years about how much talent they've had on some of these teams, but some of his best teams were teams that we didn't expect anything out of. You think about that. I'm trying to remember the exact year. I think it was in the early teens. Arkansas, I think, was picked 9th in the SEC, and they won the league that year. And the thing about Van Horn is, that is a plug-and-chug program. When something goes bad and a guy falls out, that program always seems to be able to pick up the pieces. And I think the biggest key for them has been the evolution of Hunter Holland. You know, he was the guy that was talking to our FCC coach last night about him, and they couldn't believe what he's become because they're like, man, San Jacinto, like it was like 86, 88 with a very below average breaking ball, and all of a sudden the dude's got like a wipeout breaking ball, put up some pretty good numbers.
Hey, Kendall, let me interrupt you.
It's just a program where guys will keep stepping up.
Have you got time to hang for a couple more minutes? So, Kendall, before the break, we were talking about Arkansas, and you were talking specifically about Hunter Holland. And when we got our scouting report before the game that he pitched, which was game one of the doubleheader last Friday, and I saw the whole 5-pitch mix thing, I kind of rolled my eyes because when I see somebody talk about a pitcher that's got 5 pitches, I'm like, yeah okay, you don't have anything good enough to get people out, and so you just got a bunch of junk. That was not a guy that was just throwing a bunch of junk. He commanded 5 pitches. It was fastball in and out, a really good changeup, pretty good curveball, pretty good slider. I mean, it was good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Matt Hobbs, our pitching coach, is, you know, he's certainly well noted to do really well with guys with velocity, but I mean, he's also a pitching coach that, if you look historically with Arkansas's, you know, arms, he's done a really nice job of developing those guys. You know, Hagen Smith, I thought last year, you know, had a good slider. I think Hagen Smith's slider this year has taken a big step forward. So, yeah, I mean, Matt Hobbs does a great job. I get that, like, he gets impressed because, you know, some of the injury issues they've had this year. But the guy's a really good pitching coach, and Hunter Holland's a great example. Because, like I was saying before the break, is, you know, a pitching coach in the SEC was telling me they couldn't believe that Hunter Holland had turned into the pitcher that he is right now. Like, they think it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I was impressed seeing him in person. A team that I have not seen in person, but I also have not been impressed with, is Tennessee. Like, they just don't look like a very good baseball team right now. I know there's a lot of talent there. I mean, we know about the arms. We know about the kind of the edge that they play with, and they've got some guys that can swing it. But that offense lost a lot from a year ago, and they are not the same team that they were in 2022, despite how the season ended. We know how good that team was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a much different team. Like, they're starting to realize that they're going to have to be a little different. You know, they're not going to hit. You know, I think last year they had like 7 guys that had double-digit home runs. This year they're far from that. So, you know, you're a different offensive lineup. You got to find some different ways to score runs on a consistent basis. They're scoring runs on Sunday. They're scoring runs against people's, you know, 5, 6, 7 pitchers. But what they're not doing is scoring a lot of runs on the frontline guys. And so they've got to figure that out. The biggest thing for me is when I look at a college baseball team, you know, if your hitting isn't what it was last year, you need your pitching to be what it was to sustain that level of success to an extent. And the problem with Tennessee is, you know, Chase Dolander, like, he's still, you know, one of the best pure pitchers in college baseball. The fact of the matter is he's been really average this year for the most part in terms of results. And Chase Burns has been pretty bad. I mean, if you look at his numbers, you know, Chase Burns has, like 11.90 SEC ERA. Like, that's just not going to cut it. So I actually kind of feel like Tony Vitello needs to move Drew Beam up in that rotation and move Chase Burns back and kind of just take a little bit of the pressure off of him. Because I feel like if you lose on Friday, you're throwing a lot of pressure on a dude that, you know, has an ERA nearing 12. So, you know, Drew Beam has been really solid. I would move him up in that rotation on Tennessee. But, again, I actually still believe in the team down the stretch. I think they're going to be they're kind of like A&M to me in the sense that, and probably a better version of A&M in the sense that, like, yeah, they have some question marks, but I still feel pretty good about them in the second half of the season. Like, I just think they have the personnel that'll figure things out.
You know, the team that I feel better about than anybody else in the SEC, and it's not even close, and it's not LSU, it's Florida, man. That rotation, those bats. I know Caglione didn't have his best outing last week, but man, they've got arms. They've got guys in the bullpen that can get people out. They swing it up and down the lineup. They're good defensively. I don't really see a weakness right now with Kevin O'Sullivan's team.
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned that, and I know Sully will let me hear about it. He'll wait till they win the championship to let me hear about it. But I remember in the fall, or, you know, in January, you know, I talked to all these coaches a lot. I remember Sully telling me, like, hey, keep talking about LSU because you'll be talking about Florida at the end of the season. And, like, I kind of laughed it off. It's like, oh, he's just being silly. But you're right, man. Like, this Florida team's really good. They've got swagger. They're confident. I don't feel like they're like Tennessee last year, where you're like, God, I can't stand these guys. Like as a fan, but like they're a likable team. And when you look at their pieces top to bottom, you know, Jack Caggs and the job that he's done specifically at the plate. You know, like you said, he didn't have a great outing over the weekend against Tennessee, but still a premier pitcher. You know, you look at Hurston Walter, Brandon Stroh, Philip Abner. And then you look at that lineup. I mean, you have Jack Caggs, but Josh Rivera, for my money, would be the biggest breakout player, you know, in the SEC this year. You know, You could, you know, go into the season, I think I picked Kemp Alderman, but like Kemp Alderman's kind of doing what we thought he would do. But you know, Josh Rivera has gone from a 250 hitter to 330, 340 with double-digit bombs. Like I did not see that coming, and he was already a premier defender. BT Ripel has had a really nice year for him. Cade Curlin has been really good as a young player. So man, they've got a lot of balance. They've got a deep pitching staff, and I mean, there's a very legit argument to make that we're the best team in college baseball right now.
Kendall Rogers, one more thing for you before we let you go. Let's pull it back to the state of Mississippi. I don't know how the season plays out for Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I feel confident in saying that, disappointingly, we're not going to have postseason baseball in Starkville or Oxford, like the games actually being played. Whether or not the teams get to the tournament, we'll see. I don't think Ole Miss or State is hosting. But I'm not so sure I feel the same way about Southern Miss. A good RPI. Sunbelt Conference is a good league. They had a good weekend. The Matt Adams injury hurts them a little bit. Is there a scenario where if Southern Miss just continues to win series week after week in conference play and that RPI stays right there around 20, that the Golden Eagles could be playing postseason baseball at Pete Taylor Park this year?
They definitely could. I mean, if you look at this league overall, they've got a really good RPI. I feel like they've got about 4, 5, 6 pretty good teams in that league, so you're not going to see a massive decline in RPI with a couple of losses. I think the biggest thing for me is you look, you know, just kind of the makeup of this team is, you know, they need some of these guys who are proven commodities to be good down the stretch. I mean, Chris Sargent, Reese Ewing, Carson Pato, like these are all guys who have produced at a high level in the past. And I just think this is one of the teams, even without Matt Adams, that like they're not even playing anywhere near their capability. So I think they're scary down the stretch. You know what's going to happen, though, don't you? Southern Miss is going to host, and they're going to get, like, either Ole Miss or, like, a red-hot Mississippi State team, and there's, like, a 3.
As a 3? Don't you think Southern Miss fans would be like, come on. Can we not just send them somewhere else?
You never know.
Yeah. Kendall, always appreciate the time. Great stuff. Should be